Rufus, thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting Enders Analysis and indeed Millward Brown to this Shift conference. And good morning to everyone here. So, context matters. Context affects how we, as consumers, make decisions. It's exactly what Rory has just been talking about. What we buy and how we buy it, what the circumstances are. No one ever really questions that content is king. And yet, as automated trading becomes more and more prominent in marketing, are we in danger of losing sight of the importance of context? Is context queen? Should it be queen beside the king on the throne? The purpose of this talk is very simple. It is to explore the value of environment in marketing, and in particular, to test the different perceptions of the marketing marketplace. Enders Analysis and MB were commissioned by Newsworks, and Ben Lloyd interviewed some of the senior representatives of a wide range of agencies and brands. But one person seemed to capture the spirit of at least what the brand owners were telling us particularly well. We didn't speak to Albert, but he did mention this in passing. And it is this idea of science, perhaps, versus emotion. Not surprisingly, a myriad of opinions were expressed during the process of this project, even at the level of defining programmatic and automated marketing. And I'm going to start now by summarizing some of those very disparate views. To be clear from the front, our findings don't highlight insuperable issues with machine-to-machine trading or with algorithmic marketing. Everyone we spoke to thinks that automated trading will grow. Everyone we spoke to thinks it will improve. But I think we do highlight, and you can see here, some gaps in perception regarding how the marketplace is performing today and how close it is to the promise that is being sold. So, for example, teething problems for some people are perceived as fundamental obstacles for others. Additionally, brands want to know how much of their spend is going to publishers. They want more transparency. Many brands we spoke to are nervous about the lack of transparency in both the financials of automated trading and also in relation to the targeted data itself that's being used. Evangelists of automated trading sensibly and correctly argued that automated can address perhaps all of these issues and certainly a good range of them. But our point is rather different. As automated moves up the value chain, not everyone seems to believe that the tools in the marketplace are yet fit for purpose, as one or two people put it, or even that they are fully understood. Among some general concerns, one specific fear rattled around these discussions, that context, the value of quality media for motivating consumer brand engagement, is being underrated as a measure or as an objective or as a relevant marketing indicator for a growing amount of marketing expenditure overall. And if this is right, or even if it's a bit right, we believe the timing of this discussion is critical. Let's remind ourselves of how digital and automatic marketing spend has grown. Let's go right back a few years. Digital advertising spend was well nigh zero back in 2000. But it will shortly overtake the entire expenditure of so-called traditional or analog media, newspapers, TV, magazines, radio, outdoor, etc., etc. But the nature of digital growth is changing dramatically. In overall display terms, digital is actually still a small percentage of the total market. But digital is huge and dominant as a percentage of classified and direct response advertising. That market has grown enormously, driven entirely by digital. But the point is, further market growth will surely now be driven more by display advertising than by direct response advertising. We can see early evidence of this already. This is an important debate to be having here in London right now. We're probably not surprised that the UK digital display advertising has grown disproportionately compared to countries like France or Germany. But the fact that it's grown so disproportionately to the US might surprise some of us. TV, of course, is still hugely dominant in the US. But UK display growth has exploded in a short period of time, the last 3 years. And we are now the first market in the world, without question. And our brands need to be sure that the marketplace is working for them. Now let's turn to the brand owner's position and focus on their perspective of the world. I would argue that the CMO is the most under pressure role on many boards today. Marketing has become a budget managed through procurement processes just like any other, and CMOs have to deliver more for less every year, squeezing both creative and media agencies at the front end. Furthermore, they not only have to demonstrate they have delivered more, but they have to do so to non-marketeers, principally the chief financial officer and, of course, the CEO. They have to be more scientific, or at least appear to be so. CFOs need hard evidence, and evidence, or data, comes easily and immediately from digital, while other media, and we include newspapers in this, do not supply the same richness of data that brands need. Putting money into automated selling is, in other words, the path of least resistance, and the much more difficult route is reputation and long-term brand marketing, which are much harder to measure with precision. All brands are on a spectrum from brand building through to optimizing sales. Few brands, in truth, are entirely at either end of that spectrum, although you can clearly think of examples towards the end of that, both ends of the spectrum. Agencies help brands translate their various objectives into marketing outputs. They control this marketing dial. Much has changed over the last 2 or 3 years, and some brands worry that they have relied almost excessively on the expertise and knowledge of agencies. Some brands also fear that their outputs are being encouraged into automated solutions before the quality thresholds of these solutions have fully been realized. In other words, before the methodology could unequivocally deliver against a full range of objectives being articulated. And I'm sorry, the slide hasn't quite expressed the full range of objectives that we have up there, but it includes not just the selling of products and optimizing the sales of products, but also long-term reputational management and brand building and those sort of things. At the same time, CMOs are acutely aware that they often put agencies under intense pressure through procurement procedures, exactly as I mentioned earlier. But they would like, nonetheless, greater visibility of how the spend is allocated through the entire value chain. They simply want to understand more, not less. Automated dealt with the bottom of the market in its early days, a way of generating something from effectively unsold inventory. But automated trading has since moved through the value chain, and we are on the cusp now of a major shift in the way marketing is traded and measured. Automated, it would seem, can do anything. The algorithms can be configured to achieve anything. What we are highlighting is that CMOs are not as confident in the levers in the marketplace as the agencies who are pulling the levers seem to think. As we all know, display advertising has a very different function from classified. Display advertising has always been about reaching quality, perhaps targeted, perhaps self-selecting audiences, but more importantly, perhaps, in an attractive environment, in an environment that is attractive for the consumer. TV, newspapers, magazines, whatever format they are consumed, are brilliant at raising awareness and stimulating interest among consumers who are potential buyers, who are not necessarily on the cusp of buying that minute and are thought of perhaps as out of market. Digital and automated in particular turn that marketing structure on its head. The strengths of TV, of newspapers and of magazines, of media generally, are the least valued part of a marketing ecosystem that is focused on transactions and the last click. But it is an available and immediate way of measuring marketing performance, targeting and conversion rates, being optimized at the expense of brand building and reputation, of long-term marketing objectives. Think of this example. While measurement focuses on reach and targeting and conversion, it does not consider the implications of poor experiences, such as the brand damage relating to weak targeting or offers that are past their sell-by date. Or to put it another way, could the limitations of measurement help push marketing towards a transaction tool and away from the strengths and advantages of media context that CMOs seek? Evidence still points to the critical importance of context and brand association, factors that great media brands, news brands, TV brands, all deliver. However, context would appear to be less important in the automated audience-driven marketplace than traditional media. Businesses that connect and aggregate content appear to be as well placed to generate ad revenue as those that invest heavily in content. The risk is we are therefore creating an unintended disincentive to invest in content, because the creators and aggregators will likely always be a lot more efficient at generating traffic than content businesses. Think Facebook. Of course, there's a contradiction here. Many brands are rapidly moving into or expanding their content commitments. Many agencies are acquiring and building content creation expertise. Every media business has developed or is considering its creative content function. Guardian Labs is the most obvious example of these developments, but there are countless others. For these bespoke, scale, content-driven campaigns, the potency of media brands is evidently paramount. In other words, in an important way, the entire industry recognizes the dual importance of both content and context. And the reason for this is simple. All the evidence shows that consumers are much more aware of and responsive to advertising on branded content sites. Content sites are driving much more valuable behavior than other types of site. Think of portals or social networks. Arguably, this is because of more valuable demographics. But in reality, surely these sites are visited by all of us all the time. There's huge sharing of demographics across these sites. These same users are immersed and engaged in a different way on content sites. And the effects of a trusted branded environment for marketing means that the adverts are noticed, remembered, acted upon. Original content sites are twice as effective as social networks in this way. Let's step away from press for a moment and look at TV. TV evidently generates a lot more revenue per hour than services such as YouTube. But shouldn't YouTube spend per hour actually be greater? That's where the logic points towards. The audiences are more engaged, aren't they? They are all actively selecting this content. There's no passive viewing on YouTube. The audience is young, apparently the great coveted, hard-to-reach demographic, the most attractive audience in the world. Therefore, any gap must be due to the quality of the content, the quality of the surroundings for advertisers, the quality of the media brand. Clearly, Google and YouTube are on a mission to move up the value chain by creating professional channels and content. And that's precisely the point. They recognize it's the context of the advertising that has value, not merely the traffic. Now, Newsworks is currently, as I understand, commissioning a study on the importance of context. But in the meantime, let me just briefly touch on a great study by the FT. This was a quantitative survey in which respondents were asked a series of questions to identify attributes they associated with 5 established news brands, think FT, Bloomberg, New York Times, 5 emerging news brands, think HuffPo, BuzzFeed, Twitter. Respondents were then asked to identify attributes they associated with various products and services, airline brands, tech brands, and so on. They were asked to select which media websites were the most suitable for these advertisers. Finally, respondents were shown website and brand combinations and asked which words they would associate with the brand if it was seen on the media site. Key here is that respondents had 2 seconds for each word. And in this way, the study highlighted which attributes were truly spontaneous, automatic, the implicit value of association of adjacency came through. Suffice to say that the FT, and indeed the established media generally, did substantially better at creating this halo effect for the various product and service brands in the study. So context and environment are key, and perhaps even more so for older demographics, a critical theme given economic changes in the UK. The UK, like every mature economy, is getting older, and wealth is moving older still. 71% of this nation's wealth belongs to people who are over 45. The average age of anyone in the United Kingdom is now 40 years and 1 month. What is more, these older people are attitudinally different. They're much more selfish than in previous generations. They have more disposable income. They spend more of it on themselves. Lifestyles are fundamentally different from where they were in previous generations. Or to put it another way, 45 was considered old in 1974 when Mick Jagger was 31. But the world has changed beyond recognition now that Jagger is 71. Older demographics are not old as they were 30 years ago. They are children of the 60s. They grew up with advertising. They grew into a world of expanding horizons with upward mobility. They are selfish. They do not save money. They spend money, and on themselves, on technology, on luxuries. And they are the generation that are the most responsive to marketing, perhaps because they grew up alongside this industry. Their children are the first generation in history to be less well off than them. It's a myth that consumers sort out their brand preferences when they're young, and these preferences become more and more entrenched as they age. In fact, it's exactly wrong. Young families are the most entrenched. In more or less every FMCG category, middle-aged people are the least brand loyal. And what's more, it is not 16 to 24-year-olds who are multimedia. On the contrary, it's middle-aged people who are multimedia. It is older consumers who look at Facebook on their smartphones to track their grandchildren, that have 30 apps on their tablet and still buy newspapers and magazines and watch TV on their TV. CMOs know this. They know how promiscuous older demographics are, how much energy and appetite they have, how experimental and curious they are about the world. And the important point here is that this much underrated demographic is for them, the value of trusted media is truly critical for them. I finish now on 2 or 3 very specific challenges, which, again, I think Rory touched upon. Viewability and non-human traffic. More than half of adverts are, in fact, not seen at all. Indeed, seen is very loosely defined. Half of all the pixels of an advert for 1 second, or indeed, as I think I think it's sort of rather pedantically described, 1 continuous second, as if somehow there could be the opposite of that. Kraft believed that at least 3/4 of its digital advertising was either not being viewed or being counted fraudulently. Similarly, non-human traffic is enormous. Just over 1/3 of traffic is generated by real consumers. Now, of course, overall, this was an exercise that was always going to ask more questions than it answers. And as we now move into the next session, I thought I would just, in a sense, raise 3 questions that we can perhaps carry forward into that session. Are brands and agencies' views on automated trading truly aligned? Does the reality of automated trading live up to the promise? And is there a limit to what can be traded automatically? And if so, where is that limit? How do we define it? Thank you very much.